We start with that breaking news from the Pentagon. Defense Department officials confirming anthrax shipments over the past decade have been much more frequently than had been at first reported. In fact, it's now possible more than 4 dozen shipments of potentially live anthrax bacterium were sent to labs in the U.S. and other countries. That is twice the amount that was estimated just last week. Senior political reporter Scott Thuman standing by for us live in our Capitol Hill bureau following these developments for us. Scott, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dave. Yeah, this is interesting because remember the genesis of how all this began. It was last Wednesday that there was an announcement made that essentially the military had 4 different people who were being looked at closely for the possibility of exposure to anthrax after what really just turned out to be a big mistake. They had sent out these cultures to laboratories across the country, and it was one in Maryland where during some testing they realized, no, we've got a situation here. These are actually live anthrax spores. And suddenly they started to look at where else they'd been sent, who else had been exposed, and if indeed those people were at some sort of risk. Now, the samples were initially sent out so that the government could do more research on detecting biological threats. At least that's what we're told. The Pentagon then, a couple days later, reveals that, yes, it might have been a little bit more severe than we thought. Suddenly, remember, South Korea was mentioned there. There were 22 people that needed to be tested. And now we're being told that the situation could be twice as bad. As you mentioned, 4 dozen labs that may have received these shipments. It doesn't mean that they were all live, but they all need to be looked at. On top of it all, it was FedEx that had shipped these samples because they did not believe they needed any sort of extra protection because they were told that they were dead spores as well. So there are a lot of complex factors into what happened here, and now we're waiting for Robert Wark, who is the deputy director over there at Defense, to go ahead and have this press conference that we're expecting any moment to explain just how widespread the problem is. But clearly it's become more of an issue than initially thought.
That's the bottom line in all this thing. One of the things that jumped out at this report at me, 2 of the places that these suspect anthrax shipments received, the Army's Edgewood Chemical Biological Center in Maryland and also the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Virginia. So both of those places, as well as a lab right there on the grounds of the Pentagon. So this hits pretty close to home for a lot of people all of a sudden.
It absolutely does. And I was at the chemical lab up in Aberdeen's area not terribly long ago, Dave, for a couple stories we were working on. And they are the best of the best there. Yeah. I mean, these are people brought in from all over the world to work in this capacity. And used to dealing with these kinds of substances all the time. Very much so. I mean, when we were there, we were doing a story about the fact that they were essentially trying to dismantle, if you will, the sarin gas, all the other toxic weapons that were being taken away over in the Middle East and needed to be negated, and they were putting them out at sea on a machine that they built specifically for it. They know what they're doing up there, but then again, if they don't know exactly what they're dealing with till after the fact, that's where it's problematic. They were under the assumption and belief that these were killed or irradiated anthrax spores, only of course to find out that's not the case. And if I'm FedEx, I'm a little unhappy about all this because I'm putting all my people at significant risk shipping these things. You're telling me that they're inactive, but in some cases they turn out to not be that at all. In fact, they're potentially lethal, and my folks are handling them without any special measures. Yeah, and I talked to FedEx last week about this, and you know, the poor person handling public relations there was just beside herself because she was getting inundated with these calls. And as soon as she answered the phone, she said, "Let me guess what you're calling about, anthrax." and then she issued me just kind of the standard statement that the rest of the media was getting. Yeah. But she did express to me that this was a concern because it's something that because they didn't know the level of severity with which they might be handling these spores, they're not able to prevent or protect. So they now had to look and see what kind of exposure their employees may have been subject to. And it appears, at least we haven't heard publicly, that any of them are in danger of contracting anything. But, you know, nonetheless, it's just another layer. I mean, now you have to kind of look at the tentacles that spread out from this initial shipment and who all handled it and what exposure they may have been subjected to. And, Scott, this is Washington, where ultimately the blame has to be assigned somewhere. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, doing the investigation here. Can we expect some sort of report from them at some point? Absolutely, and the CDC no stranger to being on the Hill for hearings when they examine mishaps of all sort. Now, the CDC immediately did send out investigators to the few states that were first mentioned. I know they talked about 8 or 9 states, but they knew specifically that there were some that needed testing when they looked at, I think it was Delaware, Wisconsin, and Texas were the 3 where there were 4 employees that they were most concerned about. And CDC sent investigators everywhere. They also were making sure that CDC could collect the samples properly, that they weren't just randomly shipped back to someone, and that they were secured properly, because now they had to find out, was that a tainted batch for everyone? And I spoke with a chemical weapons expert last week, Dave, who had an interesting point. She said, look, it's also important that the military is looking at the irradiation machine itself. When was the last time it was serviced? Is it up to snuff? Was it doing its job properly? And furthermore, was the staff working on that irradiation machine properly trained, vetted, licensed? Had they done everything they needed to do? So there is a lot that goes into this.
Indeed, there is. Scott Thielman for us live in our Capitol Hill Bureau. And by the way, when the briefer comes into the Pentagon briefing room there, we will take you there live. In fact, it's going on right now, Scott. So let's take it there and hear what they have to say.
I want to give you an update on our DoD laboratory review and on the inadvertent shipment of very low concentration samples of live anthrax to labs in the United States and 3 foreign countries. I'll then open it up for a couple questions and turn it over to the experts, who you can dive in and ask any particular follow-up questions that you might have. Now, for the past 10 years now, the Department has regularly shipped inactivated or killed biological material to other federal and private partner labs for development of biological countermeasures. So, for example, if we wanted to have a field detector kit that would tell us that anthrax was in the area, what we do is we work with labs and we work with partners who we then provide these killed spores with, so that they would be able to develop a detector that would help our men and women if they encounter such an organism on the battlefield. Now, on May 22nd, the Department of Defense was notified by the Center for Disease Control, and we have a member of the CDC here so that you would be able to ask any questions that you might have for them. But CDC told us that a private lab that had been working with the Department of Defense detected the growth of live anthrax from a sample that was supposedly inactivated by the department. We felt that it was an activated and safe shipment, a collection of spores, but it turned out not to be the case. Now, that immediately started the wheels turning within the department so that we could try to characterize the problem. Now, as of right now, this minute, 14:09 this afternoon, there are 51 laboratories in 17 states, 1 in the District of Columbia, and 3 foreign countries that we believe have received suspect samples. Now, I'd like to tell you that we are going, and we'll say more about this today, we expect this number may rise because the scope of the investigation is going on. And we will update these numbers daily until all the investigation is complete. Now, I'd like to emphasize to everyone here and to everyone watching this that there are no suspected or confirmed cases of anthrax infection among any workers in any of the labs that have received these samples over the last 10 years. And we continue to work with the CDC to ensure that all possible safeguards are taken to prevent exposure at the labs in question, and that any worker that might have had the risk of exposure, even to these low concentrated samples, they are closely monitored. We know of no risk to the general public from these samples. To provide context, the concentration of these samples are too low to infect the average healthy individual. As a precautionary measure, however, the department advised any laboratory that may have received any shipment of inactivated anthrax from DoD should stop working on that lot until further instructions were received from the Department of Defense and the Center for Disease Control. The department also directed the 4 DoD laboratories that maintain the repository for these samples, these anthrax samples, to test every previously inactivated anthrax sample that we have to ensure that it is in fact killed. And that is why the numbers may rise. We have a number of lots that we need to inspect and verify, and it takes some time to to actually do the test. I think it's 10 days, Franca. So it takes 10 days to actually do the test, and so we're in the midst of some of these tests, and that's why the number may grow. Furthermore, after consulting with Secretary Carter, I ordered a review of all DoD laboratory procedures, processes, and protocols associated with irradiating or killing the live anthrax. Go through the same thing as irradiating cancer cells. We use radiation to actually kill the live spores. Frank Kendall, our Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, who will have more to share with you in just a moment, is leading the department's review on my behalf and will report the preliminary results to me and the Secretary no later than 30 days from now. Now we're going to look at 5 things in this review. 1, we want to find out what is the root cause for the incomplete inactivation of the anthrax samples in DoD laboratories. Why didn't we kill the spores when we put them through what we consider to be a protocol that would? Second, after you inactivate the samples, after you kill the live spores, we do sterility testing to verify that we killed all of the spores. Those sterility tests did not detect the presence of live anthrax. We need to know why. We're going to review all existing DoD laboratory biohazard safety protocols and procedures. We're going to ensure and inspect and make sure that every DoD laboratory adheres to the established procedures and protocols. And we're going to identify any systemic problems and take whatever steps necessary to fix them. Now, this review is separate from the ongoing CDC on-site investigation of DoD labs, which we are assisting and is expected to last several weeks. After the CDC investigation is complete, the department is going to conduct its own investigation with respect to any apparent lapses in performance and to assure appropriate accountability. Secretary Carter, myself, Frank, everyone in the Department of Defense takes this issue very seriously because it is a matter of public health and also the health of all of the members of our department. We are acting with urgency, I would say, on this matter. I've directed that all of the testing of the spores are day on, stay on. We're going to do it until we get every single one complete, and this is not going to be a 9 to 5 endeavor. We are going after it as fast as we can. And we took the need to identify the initial scope of the issue, to understand what we are dealing with, and to conduct an initial analysis. And as of 1400 today, we will have a live website that is activated that will update you on any new information as we go through this investigation. Public safety is paramount. That's the #1 thing on our minds. 2, we have to get to the bottom of what caused this issue, and we are doing this. I pledge to you total transparency. This is the first step. We will keep you updated every day, and if necessary, we'll come back and talk with you. And finally, accountability. Those are the 4 things that in my mind are central to this effort: public safety, of trying to find out what is wrong, transparency, and accountability. Now with that, I'll take a couple questions. Bob?
Mr. Secretary, you mentioned early on that you know of no risk to the public health risk. And you mentioned that concentrations of the items were too low to be a health risk. Could you elaborate on that point? Are there other reasons, or is that it? And also, is there any evidence thus far of any deliberate human action, any sabotage of any kind of action like that at the labs?
Let me take the second one first, if I can. There's absolutely no indication that this happened as a result of somebody deliberately doing this at this point. Again, we will continue the investigation, but as of this point, there's absolutely nothing to indicate that this would be somebody who was trying to do this deliberately. This has been going on for 10 years. We have followed these protocols for 10 years, and this is the first time that this has been brought to our attention. So we obviously need to get after it. First part of the question,
The public health.
the public health. As of right now, the only thing, we don't like to assign percentages to this. We just know that the concentrations of the spores, they're in liquid form, not in dry form. In liquid form, the dry form is more, you can be infected more easily with the dry form, but these are liquid samples, and I'm going to let the experts talk to you. But normally, all we say is the best as we know is these concentrations are so low as they would be below the level that would normally we would expect to cause any infection in a healthy individual, but we don't like to assign any percentages or anything like that. Maybe the CDC will want to, you could follow up with the CDC or Franca when they get to that point. Barbara.
If the department is so concerned about public health or communicating its concerns about this effort, why did it take the Pentagon more than a week to come out publicly and talk about this matter for the first time, given the level of public concern? Why so many days before you talked about it? My second question is, more than a week later, several days more than a week later, how concerned are you that you still don't know the full scope of the problem? And is it still correct that you only have one live confirmed sample from the lab in Maryland that reported it to you? Have you come up with any other live? Because the latest CDC count is that there are more than 30 people on protective medical care. So let's start with why it took so long for you to come out.
Well, I think it actually happened very quickly. First of all, it was reported from the CDC, and the first thing that happened was an initial investigation. Okay, what is this? Where did this come from? What laboratory did it originate from? Where did it go? And as soon as that happened, it was briefed to me. Well, I knew on the second day, I believe, I was told that we had an investigation ongoing. And then after we met last Wednesday, I ordered the review after talking it over with Secretary Carter. So
why not come out publicly and tell the American people about it? It's more than a week. What has taken the department, with respect, sir, so long to come out and talk to the American people about this?
Oh, you mean today? Oh, okay. I ordered the review on Friday, and we actually had a debate on whether or not we should go out immediately on Friday. And at that time, the numbers were bouncing a little all over the place. I made the decision to say, let me get a little bit more understanding of what the issue is. We had already notified everybody in the labs. We put out a blanket call and said, everyone who has these things, stop working on them, find out where you sent them to. We believe that we had it very well contained within the DoD laboratory issue. And so I made the decision to take a couple days so that we could, and the numbers have gone up each day until now we have a total of 51 labs.
This has to be a concern to you that the numbers keep going up. How concerned are you that nobody can give you a fix on the scope of this problem? Is it still just one live sample?
Right now there's two different samples that are involved, 4 batches, 2 different samples. And what we're doing, though, is I ordered a test on every single spore-producing anthrax sample that we have in all of 4 laboratories. These are possibly hundreds of different lots. So that's why I do believe the numbers may go up. I don't know how many, but again, they're very, very concentrated in DoD laboratory areas or areas that work in a biohazard facility. So the risks to the public, I believe, is extremely low. If I had thought that there was a chance that there would have been a broader problem with the public, I would have immediately come out. But working with CDC, essentially because it was in DoD laboratories or laboratories that work with this on a constant basis, and because they forward it to laboratories that work in biohazard areas, we thought it was very well contained within there, and we had no reason to believe that there was any health to the broader public. So when I say public safety, right now I'm focused on the public safety of all those people who work with us on these spores. I have no reason to believe that there's any danger of this causing any type of a outbreak outside the laboratories. And I don't believe that we will have anybody infected, but we are waiting to find out. I'm going to turn it over to the folks who really understand the science of this issue. I'm here to indicate that Secretary Carter and I are being personally informed on the progress in the investigation. We will continue to do so. Let me just say again, Barbara, I want to reemphasize this. As far as we are concerned, as of this point, we see absolutely no danger to the broader American public. But for the people who work on these samples, obviously, we want to make sure that there is no problem with the people who are working on these samples in the labs and the labs that work with them.
How many people are that, by the way? How many people are we talking about? Hundreds, thousands?
I would say
We can't answer.
I can get that answer for you, and I'll have Courtney get it to you, Bob. I just don't have that number right in front of me. But we work with a large number of laboratories, and they have subs that they have laboratories. But again, all these laboratories are labs where people really understand how to work with these dangerous subjects. Dangerous substances, and the CDC works with them to establish protocols, etc.
Do these shipments go to all 50 states?
Do you know?
Virtually. I'm not sure every single one, but I think they do go to all 50 states.
Right now, we'll verify that for you.
You know, we started with 9 states. Now we're up to 17 states, the District of Columbia, and 3 countries.
3 countries.
Why does it take so long to figure out where a supposedly tightly controlled substance like anthrax was actually shipped?
This is I want Franca to explain, once you inactivate them, how they're sent, will explain how they are shipped, where they go to, where they can actually send them on. And right now, what's causing the problem is it takes days in some cases to determine if any of the lots that we are testing have any live anthrax in them. So that's why I believe that the numbers may go up, but I just don't know at this time how many that might be. I'd like to thank you all again for being here this afternoon.
One Pentagon question. There were some conflicting reports yesterday. Was anthrax, potentially live anthrax, brought onto the Pentagon reservation or into the Pentagon building? And if so, where exactly was it taken? And if so, why would it be brought anywhere near the Pentagon?
It was given to the Pentagon Force Protection Agency. They obviously do the protection of the Pentagon reservation. They would be the ones who would do some testing for it. That testing did not occur inside the Pentagon, and I'll allow Franca to give you any follow-up. Thank you very much this afternoon.
Can you give us a list of states and locations? Can you make that public? And how many people in this population you're concerned about are undergoing protective medical treatment? We have a real lack of information, as you can tell.
Right now, my understanding is we can give you all of the states, the individual locations. I will defer to our experts here. Thank you. Yeah, I really have to go. And again, most of these questions are going to be better answered by the people who are dealing with this and understand the mechanisms that are going on in the investigations. They've been working this essentially around the clock since last week.
One investigation about foreign country, also Korea.
Well, the 3 countries.
Korea was an air base.
Yes, and there are some of the people who are on the air base are under precautionary measures, but right now we know of 3 countries. Thank you very much.
A wide-ranging and frankly troubling news conference there. That's Robert Work, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, holding a briefing over there at the Pentagon about this situation that, since it was first released 1 week ago, has gotten bigger, it seems, almost by the day. It turns out to be those unintended shipments of potentially live anthrax spores, which has happened now, we find out, over a decade, is much worse than first believed. It's possible the shipments were sent to more than 4 dozen laboratories in the U.S. and abroad. That is almost twice the estimate of last week. Pentagon has repeatedly asserted that the mistakes pose no public health hazard, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is leading the investigation. But here's what we did just find out as we look at the pictures of the Pentagon. That, it turns out, is one of the places where those anthrax spores were sent, the bacterium. Other places in the immediate area, the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Dahlgren, Virginia, and also the Edgewood Chemical Biological Center in Aberdeen, Maryland, another of the places our Scott Thuman talked about, having been there a short time ago. And that's a place that is very experienced at dealing with potentially lethal substances, but these other places perhaps not at that same level of ability to handle these things. 51 labs in 17 states. Mr. Work, the Deputy Secretary, said that apparently the procedures to ensure that all the anthrax irradiated was in fact killed has not worked. And he said they are acting with urgency to try and find out why. The Defense Secretary himself, Ash Carter, who is traveling in Asia, called this an unfortunate incident. The Deputy Secretary said there's a website up now. He also promised daily briefings on the situation. Again, those three places in the area around here where those anthrax bacteria were sent, the Naval Surface Warfare Center, we believe in Dahlgren, Virginia. There was also that lab there on the Pentagon grounds, and the Edgewood Chemical Biological Center in Aberdeen, Maryland. Live coverage for you of the news conference going on, continues to go on now. The ancillary briefings going on by other people for the Pentagon press corps over there. If there are new developments, of course, we'll pass them along to you.